Design Lab, Project DL6. 3 parts of DL5 began as Adobe Classroom in a Book exercises. DL6A also borrows from CIB. This one was intended as an exploration of various selection tools. But I thought if you are going to make a selection, you might as well do something interesting with it. When you have finished 6A, it should look like something that could be used commercially on a book cover, poster, advertisement, or as editorial illustration. It may not be a perfect reality, but it should demonstrate perfect technique. You will use all of the skills in Project 5 and a few more. The instructions in the PDF for DL6A are fairly complete and fairly detailed, but I'll demonstrate everything here. First of all, I'm going to start with the lettuce head. I'm going to magnify that some for you. In the Adobe CIB, I think they use the lettuce as an exercise for the magnetic lasso tool, which will follow along a shape. Click once and just drag it along the edge and you'll find it. Click if you need to where you think you need a definite hard anchor point. And that could take a while. So I'm going to show you a simpler way. If I have an object that is on a plain white background or a really contrasty background or something where the color difference is sufficient that I can easily isolate it based on color or value, tonal level, I could just select large around the area, take the magic wand tool, holding the Alt key to subtract from the selection, click on the background to delete it from the selection. And presto, my lettuce is selected. The instructions say this is going to be all non-destructive editing. I'll give you an example of why. Now that I have this selected, I could move this over here, which will be approximately its final position in the layout. And there's a hole here where I just picked up those pixels and moved them over here. And if I now deselect that, Command D, and go on to do something else, like copy this tomato and paste it somewhere, and do a bunch of other things, and then I want to go back and move that head of lettuce, I can't because it's part of the pixels here. If I reselect that, Alt or Option click on that, and this, and that, and that, and this, and that, and this, and I sort of missed, but that's okay. I'm going to move this back over here, and now I just have another hole, and my cutting board is gone forever. In my history, I'm going to go back to the beginning, say about there, deselect that. So what I want you to do is make a rectangular selection around the lettuce. Command C, copy, Command V, paste. And if you look at the layer palette, you can see that anything I copy and paste is going to end up on a new layer. Move that over here to its approximate final position, and then I'm going to turn off the background. So I'm just looking at this. As a matter of fact, I might move it into here. Use my magic wand tool to select everything outside of the copied element. Hold the Shift key to add to the selection. Click on the white square. Now I'll invert the selection, Command-Shift+I. And at this point, I would like to have a little feather on that to make sure that the pixels that I'm moving around here will blend into wherever I put them and not look like it was cut out and stuck into a scrapbook. We don't want things to look like a scrapbook. We want things to look like it was all part of one photograph. I can do that with Shift function key 6, feather. I could do it with select, modify, feather. But what's going to happen is it will feather from the green of the lettuce out into the white. The feather goes halfway inside the selection, halfway outside the selection. So what I would also need to do is contract the selection. Well, that's a lot of steps. I can Command Option R, go to select and mask. Here, I can adjust the radius of the edge detection. And obviously, if I make that big, it's going to be less accurate. So I'm going to keep that small. I might go 1 pixel. Just type that in there. I could do smart radius. I'm not sure if that'll help or not, but it couldn't hurt. Smooth. How smooth do I want it? Well, if I smooth this too much, then wherever there should be kind of a hard corner where one lettuce leaf is behind another, magnify that, like right in there, probably should be a moderately hard corner. So I don't think I'll smooth it. If I had something I thought was going to come out jaggy, I would smooth it. Feather. Well, I'm going to go down to 1 pixel because I don't want it too soft or it will have kind of like a halo around it that will look fake. I might go 2 pixels. I might try 1.5 pixels. This is something I can readjust if I set it up this way. Down here, I have remember settings selected because whatever I do here, I might want to do on all of the other selections that I do on the project. The last thing I did here was an edge shift of -10. If I zero that out, you'll see this is right about at the edge. And if I have a feather right at the edge, it's going to go from green to white, and that may give me a little hazy white halo around it. So I will shift it in -10, maybe -20% relative to pixels, and it's not a lot of visual shift. So we'll try that, and I'll say okay. And then on my layer palette for that layer, add a mask, and the mask will automatically be based on that selection. I can turn this back on, and at least at this enlargement, I don't see a noticeable halo, maybe a little bit of white edge there. So I'm fairly confident that that's a pretty good mask. I could Command-Option-R, go into that again, Command-Option or Control-Alt on the PC, and perhaps shift the edge in -25% and hope that that Command-D deselect. There's just the slightest little haze there. Command-Option-R, let's go in one more time. Go 1 1/4 pixel feather and shift the edge in -30%. And you can see it looks like I've come in a lot there, but not compared to the size of the image. I'll say okay. Speaking of the size of the image, let's just check that. We're at 9.52 inches by 7.733 inches at 300 pixels per inch. I may ask you to change the resolution on the final submission, but we'll wait until we get to that point. So that's one object. I do these basically in order, starting with the lettuce and going around. So the next thing would be the pepper. I like peppers. I like lots of peppers. I think we'll make more than one pepper out of this pepper. And the pepper is a good one to experiment with the magnetic lasso tool. The magnetic lasso, come in just a little more. And I'm going to start right there. Incidentally, I'm in the photography workspace because I'm working on photographs. If I need additional tools or palettes, I can get them, but this should do. Yeah, I'm going to start right here now that I've got it close enough to see it, and just follow along here and let it find the edge. It's pretty good at finding the edge. If I go too fast, it probably doesn't find it as well. Sort of missed there. Use my space bar to get my hand to move this up without exiting my tool. Missed. Hard corner there. That wasn't great. You might do better on your first try. There are ways to add to that, of course. I could take my magic wand tool, hold the shift key, and reduce the sample on this 3x3 tolerance of 32. Hold the shift key, click on that. That's more accurate. Hold the shift key and click on the green here. Alt to subtract, and subtract that part. You could also go back with the magic wand tool and just try to do this more carefully. So again, adding to the selection, I'll start in here and come down here and follow that little bump I missed, and just click in here somewhere, and that will add that. Likewise, I could do that over here. Alt to subtract, and I could subtract this little part of the shadow that I didn't mean to get. So that's one way of doing that. Now, the only problem is I forgot to make a copy of this, and I'm not even on the right layer. I'm on this layer, and I have the mask selected. So to copy this, I need to be on this layer. But before I copy this, I'm going to have to save that mask because I want to copy the whole thing with its background in case I decide that I need some element of that background again. For example, I might want to use the shadow that is already here if I want to add a shadow to my finished art based on this pepper. I know you've heard me say that designing is planning, and I didn't plan this correctly. I should have copied this first and then masked it, but I hate to lose this beautiful job of selecting that I did. Just add a little bit right here. So I'd like to save that somehow. And one thing I can do is I can make a mask right now and then just copy the mask to the part that I'm moving. Give you an example of that. That would be make a mask, hold the shift key, turn off that mask so I can see what I'm doing. Going back to the art layer, Command C, copy this, Command V, paste, and then drag this mask up to here. So that's one way. I'm going to Command click on this to get my selection back, turn off this layer, go back to here, and show you another way that you can save a selection, and that's as vectors. You can have vectors in a pixel-based Photoshop file, just a PSD, a TIFF, or a PDF, which can save layers. The vectors don't add much to the file size because it's just a small amount of numbers that determine what the vectors are. But you can, on the paths palette, you'll notice I get layers, channels, and paths together usually by default. That's the way they're set up. And say, make this a work path. I'll say to a tolerance of 1 pixel. And you can see I now have vectors that with vector editing tools, much like you have on Illustrator, I have a direct select tool. I have pen tools. You can take this minus pen tool and take out that anchor point. I can take my direct select tool and adjust control handles. You move this one just a little bit this way. So if I wanted to edit my path, I could do it this way. If I wanted to draw my path, I could draw my path with the pen tool rather than using the magnetic lasso tool. Those of you who had a little trouble learning the pen tool would probably find that the magnetic lasso tool or other selection tools are actually more efficient for you than drawing vector paths. I rarely draw vector paths in Photoshop, but the technique is available. Once you have a work path, you have one work path, and if you want to have multiple paths, you save this path, and I'll call this path pepper because it's the pepper path. So if I need to go back to that path, I've got it there. Click down here on the path palette to deselect that. And then I could, again, drag a rectangular selection to get the whole pepper with its background. Shift that down a little. If I am in any selection tool, I can move it if I don't touch the move tool, but I move it with the arrow keys on the keyboard. If you move it with the move tool, you've just grabbed those pixels that you selected and moved them. For example, like that. Command Z, undo. Command C, copy. Command V, paste. And then reselect my path. You can either select the path and edit it again as vectors, or down here you can click on the marching ants line thing to indicate that you're making it into a marching ants selection. Okay, and then again, once I have that, I can make a mask for that. Oops, I didn't bother to feather that. I can double click on this and go into select and mask. Notice that I've still got the same selections I used for the lettuce because I had selected here, remember setting. And since I go to a gray background and probably won't get a white halo, I think I don't need quite as much edge shift. So maybe I'll try a minus 20 edge shift on that and say okay. Alt click to look at this. It actually feathered. I may have to, with this selected, Command-Shift-I to invert the selection and then fill the black again, and you'll notice that it bled into the selection. So that tightened my mask. If I want to see how that looks, I'm probably going to have to Command D, deselect, and with this layer selected, move it. Careful about this. Auto select. Auto select means that if I grab here, I get that layer. And if I grab here, I get the bottom layer. If I grab here, I'll get the pepper layer. I'm sort of accustomed to having that off so that if I am on the pepper layer and select anywhere, I'm moving the pepper layer. But if you would like to always be sure that you're selecting by clicking on the thing you want to move, you can hit auto select and move it that way. And again, if I shift click on the mask, you can see that the entire rectangle is still there. If I alt click on the mask, I can actually look at the mask in case I want to do some fine editing or adjusting of some part of that, and click on the pepper thumbnail to get back to the layers. Okay, I'd like this over here somewhere. I think I mentioned I really like peppers, so I like another one. So I'll say on the layer palette, options, duplicate layer. It's either duplicate layer or duplicate the layer. I'm going to call this one red pepper because I'm going to make it into a red pepper. And as long as I'm naming things, and this is a really good idea if you're going to end up with lots of layers, name them. Extra yellow pepper here. Well, I don't really need that one, so I think I'll delete it. So I'm not sure how well I masked that one because I know we made some mask adjustments. So this is my red pepper. I'm going to move my red pepper over here. Actually, I like these to be possibly in front of the lettuce. Let me move the lettuce down here. And actually, I might like the red one behind the yellow one. I might like the red one to be at a different angle so it doesn't look like it's the same pepper. Although, let's face it, it's the same pepper. Could also right click on my selection, incidentally. Let me just undo that. Command T, transform. You'll find this in the, hit the escape key here. You'll find that, it should be the edit pull down. Transform, free transform, Control T, controller Command T on the Mac. And there's some different types of them, and I don't have to go back to this to do that. Command T, transform, right click on it. I can scale it. Command Z, undo. I can rotate it. I can skew it. I can apply a perspective to it, which on a pepper, frankly, looks pretty weird. Warp it, where I actually have control handles I can move around to change how things curve. And just stretch this and distort it in different ways. Maybe we'll move these over this way a little, make it longer. I haven't tried these split warps. You might want to try those. Rotate 180, rotate 90 clockwise, rotate 90 counterclockwise, flip horizontal, flip vertical. I'm going to leave this at the same attitude as the first one because of where the highlights are. Most of these things, I'd say all of these things, were lit with a key light on the upper left. Highlights over here, shadow over here, highlight, shadow, highlight, shadow. That means the light's up this way somewhere. And that will be important if I want to change things around in some way where one object ends up with its light and shadow on the wrong side. I would have to make some modifications to that. I'm going to hit the return key to accept that.